Okay, we are ready to begin our fourth panel, discussion addressing small states' perspectives on AI and global security. Our esteemed moderator for this panel is Dr. Golfo Alexopoulos, Director of the Institute of Russian, European, and Eurasian Studies at the University of South Florida. Dr. Alexopoulos teaches a variety of courses on topics related to contemporary Russian politics and society, modern Europe, and the Soviet Union. Her current work examines the thread that connects 20th century Soviet and 20th century Russian authoritarianism, especially in the disinformation space. Her most recent book, Illness and Inhumanity in Stalin's Gulag, examines the system of violent human exploitations in the Stalinist forced labor camps between 1929 and 1953. So I'll turn over the discussion now to my good colleague Golfo, who will facilitate the discussion and lead the Q&A session that follows. Please.
Thank you so much, Adib. It really is my distinct pleasure to moderate this panel. Before I introduce the panelists, let me just say just a brief word about how this panel emerged. We have a partnership with the J3 International Division at U.S. Special Operations Command, and we're just so grateful for this partnership that's been ongoing now for 3, maybe even 5 years. So our partners at the J3I reached out to some of their colleagues in Europe, and we've been having this ongoing series of events for several years now. So we're really grateful for this partnership, which IRIS launched, and now GNSI is partnering with us on it, so we hope it continues. On this panel on small states' perspectives on AI and global security, we have Joel Brynielsson, the research director at the Swedish Defense Research Agency and associate professor at the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. Peter Bouvier Emanuel, researcher at the Swedish Defense University's Center for Special Operations Research. Juha Kukkola, officer in the Finnish Defense Forces and expert in strategic and cyber and Russian studies. And Vilma Luma-Aho, professor of corporate communication and vice dean at the University of Jyväskylä in Finland. And let me just note that the opinions expressed in this panel are those of the panelists and do not reflect the views of their respective institutions. So I'd like to begin by asking each of the panelists to give us just a few opening remarks on this topic of small states' perspectives on AI and global security. And Joel, if you would get us started, please.
Yes, and I like to do that using a few slides. So let's see here if something happens. Yes. All right, yeah, so that's me. So I'm Joel, and I'm research director at the Swedish Defense Research Agency, and I consider myself an AI researcher for the past 25 years. Writing a thesis 18 years ago on game theoretic approaches to probabilistic expert systems, and that proved to be a good way to get into difficulties and in the AI arena, because nowadays everything is about combining LLMs and game theoretic approaches. So it's very topical right now. And for the small state perspective, I think as you know, there is only one defense research agency in Sweden, so everything is small. So everything I say is related to a small state perspective here. This is a slide I showed 5 years ago, and 5 years is a long time ago. And the main conference, as you know, for neural networks and for neural information processing was then already on the 32nd round. So it was back at then already. AI was an old topic. And I showed this at a conference in, I think, January or February 2019 at the political conference, which is most foremost one in Sweden is in the north of Sweden in a skiing resort. So 8,500 participants, that's a lot. That's not what we usually see in science, and lots of submissions. So it's more related as a pop concert or something. And I think some of you knew about this, and the tickets were sold out in 11 minutes and 38 seconds. So AI has become a hype. That's the key message here. And and we need to, in Sweden at least, we need to accept that the civilian research is the driver, and we need to learn about that and apply it for defense and security. And the quote there is from a famous person having data sets, comparing it with a rock concert. So let's move 5 years forward. Then this is what we see now with generative AI coming up, and public intelligence reporting from this country goes out public and tells us about how and attributes attacks to various nations and persons and so on. Yes, and one thing that hasn't been mentioned much during this conference, I think, is astroturfing. So it's not just about deep fakes and distinguishing between what is right and wrong, but it's also affecting people's opinions for a long time, which you can do effectively by introducing a small bias in LLMs and so on. The emergence, the last since 2018, the first slide and the next slide, we can see here where the red line is the transformer models that we see today are taking over from deep learning, which is the blue line. So there is an exponential model growth. We have the compute time in a logarithmic scale on the y-axis, and we have the time scale on the x-axis. Then I like to go back to 2018 again and just provide a statement here on recruitment. And here is the Google classifier for figures, where you have 1,000 pixels as input and output. No, you have all the pixels as input, and output is the class. So it's an image classifier. And of course, you can see there also the different parts of the deep learning module doing different things. And hopefully out comes a class. And it would be good if this class is the right one. But it is easy to fool this, and you have seen examples of this before, I'm sure. And what we do is we look at the model, we run it backwards, we do not change the weights in the model, we keep that fixed, and we change the intensities in the pixels in the figure. So the two mean events to the left, they are totally different, or they're different in every pixel. So we change the intensities for 15 iterations, and after 15 iterations, we made the minivan go from a minivan into a dog, I think. So that is dangerous, and we do not want that to happen. And the thing is that what we used to do this was writing 5 rows of code. And my key message here is that today AI is not about programming, it's about writing these 5 rows of code. So we need to think of recruitment in that it is not about having recruiting programmers writing lots of code, but it's rather recruiting people that know how to read research papers and get into the research frontier and understand what to do. And that is a problem in Sweden. I have a colleague who wanted to recruit for cybersecurity for my agency, and that was some years ago, and we looked into how many PhDs do we develop with Swedish citizenship that can actually be employed at our agency, and I think it was 10. So 10 possible employees for the Swedish Defense Research Agency. And also they want to, you should have a low salary and want to work for the state and so on. So no one, I don't think we managed to recruit a single person. So we have a very hard time recruiting the right persons. You can also synthesize video, and this is also a very old example, but my key message here is that everything is on the net. So here's my webpage at the university, and here's my face. And if you steal that and you take a model, you add these together, and you can have the input here is another video, and you have a photo showing me, and you can easily just bring this together, and this can be done in 15 minutes and make this video. And this was back in 2020, right? So today these techniques are impossible to distinguish. So the generative models, I think this is a problem and a fantastic opportunity, which we're going to see more of in the future. So generative AI has led to fantastic things and also very scary things. And possibly someone saw this also a few years back when it comes to text. So today we generate text, and it is impossible for a human to distinguish between these texts. This is done by OpenAI, where 52% means detection rate means you throw a dice, basically, and it is very hard to distinguish. Okay, so that was some old research, and let's get into some new research then, because we heard yesterday about the AlphaGo being something that happened and so on. And the AI today is made to solve problems and put forward the absolutely best solutions. But for a human, it is not always the best solution that is the best, but you need to also be able to resonate and argue like a human person. And usually you need to think just one step ahead and not several steps ahead. So we need to look into behavioral game theory and just beat the opponent by thinking one step ahead. And to combine that with large language models and play diplomacy. So diplomacy here is a game that is played to, you need to argue and have collaborate with people and so on. So that's our current research agenda, to look into this kind of AI and try to develop decision support systems that can be used for strategic interaction. We haven't got very far, but next year I will be able to provide the results. And also, since it's a small state perspective, I think I have a wall of text here it is very important for us to focus on the very right questions, and these are the questions I think we should focus on. This is the research agenda we have gone into deeper at the Defense Research Agency and have projects on and so on. The first 4 bullets are something we have started with 10 years ago or so. And then the bullets in the end, let me look at these. Yeah, you can see the new things about acting unpredictably, and you need to look into the large language models and so on. Automation of work is a very important thing to look into, and automation of work is about looking into the occupations we have in cybersecurity, in the military profession, and so on, and go down and look at the skills and abilities and how these can be automated. And I think I will stop there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes. Thank you. I couldn't help myself when I listened to General Fenton. He commented his picture, and when I see my picture, there's a bit of a difference. If that is AI's transformative power, or rather human indetermination, and perhaps context-based adaptation when it comes to the glasses, I'm not sure. But I engage in how AI is impacting modern warfare and warfighting at the only defense university in Sweden. More specifically, I'm building AI models to understand the role and functions of AI in decision making, in specifically targeting with limited information and emergent targets. Having spent 25 years with the Special Forces, I find myself well suited to discuss what it's like being small and with limited resources compared to more strategic competitors. I also would like to thank all the previous panelists because they made me change my reflections points. So a bit scattered here, but I would like to share as an opening 4 reflections related to the question of how do we want to use AI. And in support of these reflections, I use 2 assumptions that's actually presenting itself in many of the strategic visions and investments as of today, which is AI is becoming an intellectual necessity, and modern warfare will have to increase automation, robotics, autonomy, and collaborative work with artificial intelligence agents to restore contemporary mismatches in decision-making, C2 arrangement, and joint concepts. So first, we know that the amount of data and information, as well as the speed, challenges our human cognitive abilities, as well as some of the paradigms of human in command and control, and our ability to manage situational awareness in operations. We could perceive AI and automation as resources, safeguarding the integration of relevant information, expanding the decision space through rapid optional approaches, etc., in order to optimize decision-making, as well as command and control of an increasingly larger body of AI-enabled forces and assets. Integrations of AI to mitigate for human limitations are likely to come at a cost. Allowing AI to be part of decision-making calculus implies making trade-offs, such as less human control. Decision advantages will probably have to include the acceptance of a new decision continuum, as I call it. This will require human judgment, as have been discussed, or perhaps professional judgment. But how will we educate our leaders for that? That's a question to be answered, I would argue. Secondly, a short reflection on speed, because everyone has been talking about speed as part of time, perhaps, concept. But if modern warfare will continue to adopt AI-empowered sensors and weapon systems, then this will enable rapid combat engagement. In turn, it may put pressure on the next level of command, and so on. And somewhere along that chain of command, that pace or tempo will have to slow down to allow for strategic thinking and diplomatic or political discussions. So we need to find some kind of pacemaker here when it comes to warfare. Thirdly, AI is pushing the boundaries of what is possible. It challenges cherished beliefs and contemporary paradigms. And from a special forces and special operations perspective, this could actually offer opportunities to start creating chameleons by treating SOF as assemblages with a variety of functions, core tasks, and missions, or ride the waves, as General Fenton mentioned. It could unlock a forthcoming era of special operations with fewer boundaries and more freedom to adapt to changing environments and strategic requirements. That could provide latitude for new special operations assemblages, not least for small states. I argue that treating special forces as assemblages will unlock those new conceptions and would contour emergent designs and employment, making them chameleons, more pertinent and versatile and less contained to create new dilemmas to the adversary. At a low cost, that would be like a David and Goliath thing. Low cost and high effect. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you so much. Juha?
Okay, is the mic on? Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Golfo, and thank you for having me in this panel. For my opening remarks, I offer some thoughts on AI from the perspective of a small state neighboring a hostile authoritarian great power, aka Russia. Finland and Sweden are located next to Russia, and that is a thing that we cannot change. And Russia is very interested in developing AI solutions for economic purposes, for controlling its own society, for information warfare, and for conventional and nuclear warfare. Russia's technology development and innovation potential may be weaker than the United States or China's, but its AI R&D is comparatively well-resourced, and patriotism is an effective tool for mobilizing researchers in Russia. Russia tries to find asymmetric answers to strategic problems and asymmetric means for the battlefield also. As AI is not a single thing, Russia may succeed in developing some niche capabilities in the future, and it will most definitely try to use AI-based systems and advanced robotics in the next war. Thus, development of AI capabilities is of critical importance for Finland and for Sweden's national security, as we are small states next to Russia. Although both states have high technological innovation potential, modern digital infrastructure, and skilled workforce, we have very limited resources, concerning like microchip, large data sets, and of course money. Therefore, everything related to AI cannot be done nationally in small states. But of course, some critical AI systems must be developed nationally. The question remains, what systems, how, and by whom? Which things are critical? What are the systems where we can rely and trust somebody else? And who can we trust? Should we try to acquire cutting-edge technology or trust in try and tested good enough technology, which will become obsolete very fast? And concerning autonomous systems, should we concentrate on mass or quality, stock our warehouses, or rely on crisis-time supply chains to deliver us what we need? Should we try to be leaders in some AI technology area and become dependent on our allies and partners in others? What are the markets that we should target as small states to have basis for a sufficient national AI economy? Finland is trying to find answer to these questions about AI development. Finland has had an AI strategy and development program since 2017. There are government and private innovation investment programs and cooperation mechanisms in place. Finnish Defence Forces is cooperating with university researchers, for example, with Finnish Center for Artificial Intelligence in Aalto University. Finland is taking part in EU and NATO procurement and innovation programs, and Finland is using the existing national comprehensive security framework to mobilize support for AI development. We have chosen to become NATO members, so we are not trying to do everything by ourselves. However, developing and procuring AI technologies is not enough in itself. A rule-based world order is important for small states as it increases stability, trust, and predictability. Unfortunately, transparency, predictability, and confidence building concerning AI might be difficult to achieve, as we have heard in previous panels yesterday and today. To address these issues, Finland has joined the Declaration on Responsible Military Use of Artificial Intelligence and Autonomy, prepared under the leadership of the United States. Finland will participate in international discussions to further develop the principles of the declaration. Also, as an EU member state, Finland is taking part in AI regulation development in the civilian sphere by implementing the EU AI Act. But what about when the rules break? Because Finland is logistically almost an island, an enemy can try to isolate us from allies and supplies by using autonomous systems, for example. These systems can also be used to destroy critical infrastructure and terrorize the population, and AI can be used to manipulate the information environment. Autonomous platforms and AI will be used by the enemy to support the achieving of information, air, sea, and land superiority. That is why national AI-enhanced capabilities to gather intelligence, monitor the multi-domain battle space, and to deny the freedom of movement and to destroy enemy autonomous assets is important, even in peacetime, for a small state. So to conclude, Russia and China have somewhat different approach to AI, information warfare, and the basic rules of the international order than the West. This may lead to political and technological fragmentation and technological alliances which guard their capabilities jealously. Small states have little room for maneuver in this kind of situation. Thus, for a small state neighboring a hostile authoritarian great power, the choice in fragmenting world is simple but hard. We can either ally and integrate with a friendly technological power with similar values. We can adopt a high-risk strategy and try to make it alone, or we can stop existing even as a small state. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Vilma.
Sure. So, very good afternoon, or morning, it might still be. Greetings from a very new NATO member. We've been there for a while now, and we like to think ourselves as the superpower next to a small nation of Russia. Why, you ask? Partly because we were the only nation within the last wars that actually managed to be independent after the late developments and everything that happened. And in that sense, even though we are a small nation, we have something that we like to call sisu. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that word. There's actually a new movie out there with that word as well, so if you want to know about it, see the movie. Sisu is kind of like grit, and that is something that small nations develop when you have to have stamina in an environment that is impossible to survive in. And this kind of stamina, you can't buy it. It has to be produced under stress. And small nations are always under some form of stress. Now, this is a panel on small states, but actually I would argue that we are the well-to-do, better off part of the world's small states. We are the Nordic welfare states. We have so many things that many of the world's other small states don't have. So what you're listening to is actually kind of put on your filter of these are the Nordic people talking about their happy life kind of thing. But I have 3 points today. So I guess the question is always, why are you here? I'm here probably because of my dual roles. So in addition of serving as the vice dean and being a professor of communication at the business school in Jyväskylä in Finland, I also am on the board of advisors of the National Defense University in Finland, and also chair the social science division of Matine, which is actually a special unit put together by the Ministry of Defense in Finland to bring together everything that the academics in social science know about defense and put that into action for the ministry in practice, almost real time as it develops. So, 3 points, that's what I promised. First point, I'd like to suggest that we are actually in an age of unpeace, which comes from a very popular book nowadays. And in that environment, there is no longer a clear division between war and peace. That means that we can't really have a peace mentality in people's minds, and we cannot have a war mentality, because that wears you out. And in that kind of world, there is a division between negative peace and positive peace. We are very much actually in the stages of a positive peace environment at the moment. And when you're talking about an age of unpeace, it's often a question of, well, what is true and what is not true, and there is misinformation or even proven disinformation. But that, I would argue, is actually a cultural trait. Only in Western linear cultures is truth considered scientific by facts. In many other countries, for example in Russia, we could argue that they are multi-active cultures, where truth is actually something that's negotiated. It's not based on facts. Facts play into it, but you have to have a dialogue with the people to realize what is the joint truth. And then there are some countries where truth is more reactive, in the sense that it's focused around societal harmony, and you have to figure out who in society needs to be at peace with this topic that we now call truth. And before you have everybody at peace, it's not considered a truth. And now us, coming from this linear active kind of world where we think it's only facts, it's very strange that we are demanding everybody else to act when AI develops in the way that we expect it to be, which is factual and make sure that it represents everything that's scientifically proven, when most of the world is not built in that way, not built around these kinds of facts. But that's my first point, age of unpeace. And for young and small nations, I think preparedness is in our DNA. So we have to be partnering, we have to be collaborating, we have to be prepared for everything. And a funny note, Finns and Swedes, we're really into freezing stuff. You know, we have like a summer that's like maybe a week or so. And we have this joke, summer is very short in Finland. Last year it happened on a Tuesday. The freezing of blueberries and strawberries is really good, you know. This is something that's in the mentality of all the small nations. And this is something that's missing from the superpowers. You don't see the need to save something for later on, because there will be plenty and abundance. And I'm guessing this could be something that you guys could actually learn from us. Besides, strawberries are really good in the middle of the winter. Okay, second point. Communication is increasingly vulnerable in the AI era to hijacking, meaning that somebody hostilely takes over what you're saying. And deepfakes are common in that sense. And I guess this is becoming a new business. So my example is of, I think he's from Iceland, this funny Instagrammer called Grape Jokes. His jokes are borderline funny. They're kind of like dad jokes, but you know, not always politically correct. And his account was actually taken over without him really knowing, and of course copied into 15 different accounts. And these 15 different accounts, fake accounts, post all the same stuff that he posts with his kid, with his comments, with stuff that's going on. The only difference is he doesn't have on those fake accounts as many followers as on the real account. And of course the fake accounts are asking the followers for money. So what's happening is that these fake accounts are actually monetizing the parasocial relation that this influencer has built with these audiences. And because of the parasocial relationship, he's borrowing the trust that he has earned. And it's become a business model, kind of banking onto somebody else's points in there. Now, what do we say in small nations related to this? I guess one thing we've always been accustomed to is language barrier protecting us, because nobody else speaks our language, you know, nobody bothers to learn the language. If you want to learn Finnish, talk to me afterwards. It's something that's not happening anymore, because AI is actually breaking this barrier. AI speaks pretty good Finnish now. Still not perfect, as I read in my students' essays, but getting there. And another thing that's protecting us usually is social media and also media literacy, that we're able to kind of tell which part is true, which part is untrue. But at the same time, these are also something that we have to relearn, because social media is changing the whole literacy environment. And to my last point, Golfo is looking like she's ready with this, like move over. I like to suggest that, and this is something that comes from the Army Cyber Institute, we have the new weapons of digital mass destabilization ahead of us. So it's not like we're destructing something in real time, but we're just destabilizing the way people are behaving and what they're thinking. And in this kind of thing, we like to talk about situational vulnerability. What are the situations in which our people are the most vulnerable? What are the situations in which our software is the most vulnerable? When are we, as the whole nation, most vulnerable? And of course, research would suggest elections, times of decision-making, times of change, stress, financial pressures, and I guess you could say that all of these are this year. So we're vulnerable in many ways. And what does this mean for small nations? We like to brag that we have a really high trust in authorities, and we call it generalized trust. So basically it means if you trust your neighbor, if you trust the tax people, you are very easily likely to trust everybody else in society, hence making life very easy, because you don't need contracts, you don't have to worry that somebody will sue you in Finland or Sweden. So go ahead, bump into our cars, it's, going to be okay. And it also means that there's going to be a lot of agile decision making. This is something we're quite good at. There was a discussion about NATO membership in Finland for decades. We changed our mind in one day. Everybody in the whole society was for it. There was no public debate. It was more like agreed on. And this is actually something that I would ask my Swedish colleagues, because Finland and Sweden did a different process in this. And granted, we have different legislation. So in Sweden, you can burn religious documents. In Finland, you can't burn religious documents. So I guess part of the kind of astroturfed attention and dialogue that started off there was due to this Quran burning that happened in Sweden. You know what happened in Finland? The police confiscated the Qurans that were about to be burned. And the joke is, you can have them back the day after we got the NATO membership. So I don't know if they were returned. That's it.
Okay, thank you so much. This has been a really fascinating discussion from these two new NATO members, both small states that border a hostile nuclear power. And they did raise a number of problems and challenges. The fact that they're small, they only have one research institute, one defense agency, they've limited resources, but that they deal with these challenges by forming alliances, being more resilient, and developing what Vilma called grit and stamina. I want to push you a little further on this and ask you, how, because the way that you framed it, some of these challenges you've managed to overcome, how many of these challenges do you find really intractable and difficult to deal with, even in light of your strong alliances? And what are some of the solutions, do you think, moving forward to some of the challenges that you face as small states bordering a very hostile state?
Well, I can try and start at least. What struck me was linked to previous panels yesterday, talking about use cases, actually, and the importance of use cases and how you frame those use cases, because in two ways. I mean, one, if we have AI, since that's the topic here, then we need to be pragmatic when we build those use cases, because we need to try and reflect reality, and not be hindered by ethics or current legislation, because I believe that if you do that, if you build your use cases from reality and realism, then that appreciation of the ethics and legislation and being responsible and so on will have something tangible to grasp, rather than the opposite. That will only be a hinder. Secondly, I think we need use cases from the opposite direction, because we might fool ourselves here and have self-inflicted vulnerabilities built in. So, I mean, we have a diverse battlefield in Ukraine at the moment, with trench warfare and modern AI-empowered drones flying overhead. So we need to be wary about when it fails. I mean, it's an old saying in at least soft communities, that low tech when you can and high tech if you have to. And I think that has to go along with also the strategic thinking on use cases, because what happens if we lack what we have is that ladder. If we fall down a step, can we even reach up again? Or are we confined at a level where we won't be able to use what we thought we had to use, and have we prepared ourselves for it? So I think use cases are a good thing, and being pragmatic when you build those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. A military perspective for this question, the solutions. One thing is, of course, the education of military future and current military leaderships. That's something we are doing at the National Defense University on AI and autonomous systems. It's a developing field, and there's lots of work to do still, because we don't really understand the issues. When we are looking what's happening in Ukraine at the moment, when we are looking at what's happening in the cyberspace, it's constantly changing. And taking everything from all the observations that we are making and putting that in the curriculum of future officers, it's a lot of job to do for a small state. And that's why defense cooperation and intelligence sharing, I think, is a critical component also for answering the solutions concerning AI in the future. And about Russia, I study Russian. I have researched Russian indirect and asymmetric warfare, and my personal opinion is that we should fight fire with fire. There has been a lot of ethics, talk about ethics here, and I totally agree. But we shouldn't tie our hands behind our backs, because they are not going to do that. And we should try to find AI and autonomous system solutions which have critical destabilizing strategic effects if we need to use them. So that's a military point of view. Thanks.
Joel or Vilma, what are possible solutions to some of these challenges of small states?
Well, I can give it a try. So the way it looks to me is that democracy is being used against us at the moment. So we're kind of victims of our own system. We are enabling and we're empowering the voices that are being used against us, which is less of a problem in less democratic settings. I guess one solution to this is to think about all development, not just dual use, but like trial or quadruple or 5 times use, in the sense that when you're developing something in a small nation, you're not developing it just for the military use, you're developing it for potential range of different futures, different scenarios, and it could be also thought of as a life cycle, kind of like a life cycled thing. Something that has come to an end, especially when it comes to equipment, could be utilized in several unpredictable ways. But as for solving this kind of a challenge, I think especially the Nordic countries are really good at self-criticism. Europeans in general, we're really good at criticizing ourselves. So if you ever go back to Europe, you know, self-criticism, something Americans often lack, it's appreciated there. So in that sense, I guess we're really good at learning what went wrong. And in that way, I know this is a new challenge, but there are always lessons to be learned from what did we do wrong and why did we do wrong that. And this is something many organizations, especially military organizations, don't really have a lot of time devoted to it. Of course, yes, when it comes to operations, but when it comes to these kind of unheard tacit information, things that were kind of hinted at, we don't have systems to mark everything down. So not all the risks are always mapped out there, and it's something that's inherited in the knowledge, but not always explicitly discussed.
Yeah, I do not have much to add, but I think workforce development is a key issue to Sweden. Very, very few people that can take the jobs that we need to fill. And also I think we need to be agile in terms of working between organizations, between authorities, and sometimes we talk about Sweden AB, Sweden the organization, so that we need to collaborate and not do the same thing in several agencies, for example. Work together as a team, that's important. Thanks.
So before I turn to more AI-related questions, I want to pick up on this theme of education, because everyone on this panel teaches, you're involved in a university or a research institute, you're involved in training, and in our audience we have a lot of students and they're interested in how AI will shape the workforce of the future. So what advice or thoughts do you have for young people who are anticipating a workforce that will be utterly changed by AI? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I can start there. We did some work. Actually, it was one of the bullets I showed you, which I think is important to think about. And of course, there are many reasons for jobs to be automated, but there is quite some research on that, and it boils down to what skills and abilities are needed in the future. So this research typically looks into a whole profession and what needs to be done in that profession. For example, cybersecurity, you can take the standards here from United States. NIST has a cybersecurity workforce framework, which comes down to about 1,000 skills and abilities that needs to be fulfilled. And this can be automated to a various extent, and of course not all will, but you need to look into what skills and abilities that can be automated and learn the ones that has potential for the future and will be necessary to fulfill. And the things to look out for then would be creativity. Does the job require lots of creativity, like a research profession or something like that? And that's something that is hard to automate. But it's not super hard, so that's, in a research it can be automated to a fair extent. Social interaction is hard to automate. Physical work is fairly easy to automate. And statistical data is something to look for. Is there statistical data available for learning, for machine learning? And typical jobs, of course, these parameters relate to each other. But yeah, I think you should think of future jobs in these terms. Lawyers will be very hard to automate. Database administrators will be easy to automate. So that would be my advice for students.
Well, okay, so I could be next. Interesting question. I mean, there's so many layers to it from a military perspective, or let's say from a leader perspective. I would argue that in Sweden, at least, we have a discussion on stepping up and reaching the level that is required, because nowadays, when you engage in actually decisions for integrations of AI, you cannot just state that I take responsibility. You might not even know what kind of responsibility you are taking. So rather you need to be able to take responsibility, and that requires a bit more of a technical skill set, but some kind of level, so that you know what you're dealing with, because this is not just the ordinary challenges that we've had. These are new challenges. When it comes to education, I mean, yeah, start educating yourselves in it, because I think we have, I mean, at any given time, you will have a society divided into different ages and knowledges. So I think there could be room for leveraging the use of the younger generation, actually guiding the older generation in this matters. And to some extent, in Sweden at least, it's already, I mean, AI is being implemented all over. Perhaps not so much in the more conservative and traditional labor of military, but I mean, we have, I mean, in cities we have already, they are implementing AI systems to a certain, social, what's it called? Yeah. So the social money that you would get to ensure that everyone is treated the right way, that's already implemented in some cities in Sweden. And the bank systems are already using it, and we are, in fact, using it every day, all of us. So, I mean, we are hyping some parts of AI, and we're already accepting it. So the gradual shift here is also something that we should perhaps be wary about, because we are just slowly but steadily accepting it, and some of the more hyped versions, or they might get some attention, but behind our back, we're already doing it, at least in Sweden.
Okay, my short advice is to get a technical education to at least understand what's happening. And it's easier to get a technical education when you are young, believe me, because when you're older, all this stuff gets more complicated and difficult. But also to keep an open mind for a multidisciplinary approach, because as we have heard yesterday and today, AI is also about humans. So keep an open mind about social studies and things like that. And also don't forget social skills, because hopefully AI will not be leading us in the short-term future. Humans will be leading us, other humans, so social skills are still important.
Mm-hmm. So what we know from studies is that Gen Zs and Alphas are actually very values-based. So the younger generations want to be working for something good and something that meets their value base. And in that environment, my suggestion would be to broaden your focus onto what all other skills and places and work environments can you utilize toward that goal, and not just focusing on this one thing that you want to do. At the same time, this is an information environment that's very rich in all kinds of sources and nuances. And in that sense, I would say you need to build in psychological flexibility. This is something similar to the SISU thing that I was talking about. So something that kind of enables you to roll with bad times and good times, because this is what we're finding also in research about the younger generations. They are lacking this kind of stamina, partly because of us helicoptering parents who've helped them through everything, and partly because of the environment where there is no longer a need to develop this kind of a long-term focus on something, but you can solve things much quicker. So psychological flexibility and maybe also some cognitive security, in the sense that how do you equip yourself against influence attempts in your thinking? This could also be on the curriculum for many of the universities. This is something we're focusing on in Finland, especially now. So we know that influence attempts are going to happen. We know that they're going to be better than ever. How do we equip our individuals to deal with it? How do we equip them to understand this is now an attempt to appeal to my emotions with this video that looks like my son asking for help, he's been kidnapped, but I know that he hasn't been kidnapped because I just talked to him 2 minutes ago. How do I deal with this fake message? How do I make it sure that whatever skills I have, I can kind of utilize them, draw on my abilities, and use the support that's out there? So kind of this softer landing here.
Thank you. Did you want to add? Yes.
Yeah, can I, because you talked about the young generation, and yeah, I came to think about something else. A recommendation for me would be to get a job in a healthy organization where you can keep on developing yourself and keep on educating yourself for the rest of your life. And I say this because what I see in the security organizations is that when you start using AI and data science, some organizations create a special unit for that and accept that young people would like to work in a different way. They want to learn things and they want to be in such an environment. And other security organizations think that things are so secure, so you hire one person to solve the particular task for that unit. And that person will not stay for long, or that person will stop to develop. So that's what we typically see, and I also, it's super duper important that you should be in this next generation organization where the data science unit has some money and good GPU computers, and you come to work every day and you keep developing your AI skills. You should not be that single person that solves just this particular unit's problem, because then you will, after 5 years, have a problem. For the young generation, keep on asking. You should ask for a good environment without too much hierarchy and so on.
Thank you. Great advice. So now we're turning to some audience questions. I'm going to pair just a couple questions, and you can address one or both, whichever you'd like. How do small states' perspectives shift when they are economically dependent or otherwise exploited by bordering or global powers? What role does ethics play in decision-making from a small state perspective in comparison to the US when it comes to defense applications?
I can get us started.
Yeah,
Sure.
Okay.
So yes, situational vulnerability and situational changes, analyzing what's going on, it's really central. I guess I have a great example, which is the war in Ukraine at the moment, because what happened, of course, was that Finland had major business deals with Russia. And some of the Finnish corporations still do, but that was like one of our biggest industry partners. And how do we deal with it? It's a matter of balancing your own democratic and ethical views with those of the business life that's out there. In Finland, the public opinion was very much against continuing anything in Russia. So we've had major corporations having to pull out with really big losses. Of course, the Russians continued with those organizations and confiscated their belongings and continued those businesses in their own ways. So they were major losses. But the point was that the support in the homeland, so in Finland, the support for this kind of business was so strongly opposed that you couldn't continue, even though if it would have been very prosperous in that sense. So yes, we're dependent and losses happen, but I guess at the moment it seems like we are prioritizing ethics in the sense that if our Finnish employees, if our Finnish customers don't want us to continue collaboration in Russia, then we pull out, even though it might be a financial suicide to some companies.
Yeah, okay, well, I agree to a lot that that Vilma mentioned here, and from my perspective, being a Swedish citizen in Sweden, I find that we've come to deal with some of those. We have not been so much dependent on, for instance, Russia, but the dependence that we've had has been under the scrutiny, and we have altered the course to become truly independent from them, to ensure that we don't have any kind of economic or otherwise influence, and we know that we are affected of them. We know that they would like for us to become like pushing for digital authoritarianism, if you will, by trying to, do subversion and so on. But I think what we see as of now, and so that's answering how we deal with it. I mean, we are more or less soon independent from it. It's been a large discussion, strategic discussion. When it comes to ethics, I would go back to what I mentioned previously. We are quite pragmatic, and as Vilma mentioned in her opening remarks, kind of remarkable how we can just switch, the light bulb from being, a bit blurry and open-minded to just focusing. We just had a month ago a conference, a summit, where the Supreme Commander stated, prepare to war, or prepare for war. And, well, it took 24 hours, I think, and it was huge reactions. And the day after, the government restated it, along with the other agencies restating it. And, I mean, they did it for reasons of becoming more resilient in society, and it had the effect. I mean, people were just changing their mindset. Perhaps not over the night, but within a few days, the discussion was over, and everyone is now more or less talking about we need to be prepared for war. And that is all due to the situation in Ukraine, which is so close to us, and we know that the neighboring country, as Juha mentioned, is Russia, and it's Russia that's the aggressor. So it's kind of pragmatic view on it, but that leading to the ethics, I think that we will be pragmatic there as well, like Juha mentioned. We foresee that would not be a conflict, that would not be a war, that would be an existential war, which means that we would then contextualize our ethics and be pragmatic.
Thank you. Anyone else want to handle one of these two questions? No? Oh, we'll move to the next. Okay. Next question is, AI will turbocharge hostile information operations, and you all have suggested that you are definitely on the front lines of Russian information operations, but I'm sure that Russia's allies like China and others are involved as well. So how do your smaller, less resourced states handle AI-powered information operations? And second question is, what are the risks and opportunities for small states to use AI to protect their soft power? One or both, please.
Yeah, so the thing, how are we protecting? Of course, one answer would be that we need to develop our organizations and look into that and have good computer programs and people looking at that. But one thing I come to think of is that you need to be critical, and that we have, for example, in school, that everyone is learning about critical thinking. So my kids that are attending school at various level, they learn about critical thinking in school, and they give me a hard time. So when they come home, they question exactly everything I tell them, and yeah, but I think that's a good thing that we have. I didn't notice, I didn't see it coming, but really, if they have educations on that and are looking at social media and what you see there, and have examples in school, so it's on the schedule there. That's a good thing to have in society. Next generation will be much more critically thinking, I think. Stop there.
From Finnish perspective, and I very much agree with Joel. What we have and what we are trying to provide is good education from the elementary school up, to educate our citizens and people about the dangers of information influencing and information operations. Critical thinking is essential, and that's also being taught from the elementary school up in Finland. And then, critical thinking is, of course, connected to media literacy. That is a hot topic currently in Finland. Ilma will add on that, I think. And perhaps one way of countering AI influence operations is also the equal opportunities provided to people to get access to information, to education. So good internet connectivity and things like that are essential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, did you know that higher education is free in Finland? So you can send your kids to college for free. Also open for Americans, not that I'm shopping, but... So if we're looking at disinformation and misinformation, the newest findings on it, what resonates with people? I think we're shooting at them with wrong weapons, because we have this mentality that if somebody is misinformed, they lack information, and we just teach them to understand it better and provide the right information. And we see this in organizations kind of trying to correct information or put it out there. But actually the newest research suggests that disinformation resonates with people who are left out of societies in some form, or feeling isolated, or that they have some form of stress, whether it's financial or environmental or physical, but some kind of a stress level that's out there. And the newest tool actually, and this is a very soft approach from me, but here it goes, is actually empathy. In the sense that when you see a neighbor or a friend descend down in the spiral of some conspiracy theory, they will not come out of it if you provide them with information of how wrong they are. In fact, they will just spiral further because they understand that you're there out to get them, and you're part of them, and they've already brainwashed you. The only way to do this, to get to them, is to provide the same kind of safety and security that this online environment that is feeding them this information provides. Acceptance, belonging, looking forward to understanding why they are feeling how they're feeling. And this is something we're not very good at. Anybody in the world, Everybody is really good at educating and correcting with information, but very few of us are really good at actually listening to people, what they want, looking at their emotional needs, and especially in isolated communities within our countries. It happens in all parts of the world where people are feeling isolated and left out or rejected. And this can be just emotional. It doesn't have to be physiological always. How do we reach them to make sure that they feel that they can trust and engage with us before we spam them with information?
Yeah. Okay. So to complement what my colleagues mentioned here, information at war and trust. I mean, in Sweden we have re-established or reactivated, if you will, the Department of Psychological Defense. But to traverse from Vilma here, that is probably for my generation and above. They would perceive that Department of Psychological Affairs or Psychological Defense as, the most trustworthy there is, whom will mitigate for anything that is misinformation or disinformation. But for the younger generation, I think we still have a challenge to reach them, and the best there is at the moment is probably what Joel started off mentioning, having them being critical even to you as a father. Accepting that there are more than one truth out there, be it or not.
Yeah, just a short comment. It's really great talking to colleagues here, actually. So I'm really enjoying what you guys are saying. I think the question is always, who is an influencer to the person I'm trying to reach? And yes, it's true that traditional organizations or ministries or defense units are actually something of an authority for most older generations. For younger generations, it's increasingly social media influencers. And this is what the government in Finland is doing. When we had the COVID wave hit Finland, we actually had the government work with the most popular social media influencers and YouTubers and had them talk to the authorities, because if those people were listening to the authorities, then it kind of meant that this is legit information, a word that we in Finland, our teenagers like to use. So if you want to sound really cool and hop in Finland, just say legit. Yeah, except we pronounce it legit in Finland, which, roll with that. So the new media influencers are actually the way to actually reach the newer publics. The challenge there is, of course, that they are not in the process or in the business of providing safety information. They are in the business of making money. And partnering with brands and organizations is all good, but the minute you are actually brokering your social capital, so all these relations that you build just to get a message of the government across, you need to have developed a very good relationship with the government. And I guess this all comes down to, are we providing good experiences for all citizens? Because that's the best thing we can do as governments, provide and ensure that everybody has a good experience, that they can actually trust us to take care of things.
Yeah, so I build on further on that. And who is an influencer? And for me, the influencer, for me personally, it is Swedish news. So I watch the news all nights at 9 p.m. or something. And perhaps then I'm biased, because Swedish news is probably biased in some way. I don't know. But and for other people, the influencer is someone else. So it comes down to AI again, and the systems we are developing, and the recommendation to intelligence authorities is, of course, to work with data-driven open source methods to provide a statistical account, not just looking, you shouldn't go to work starting with some seeds and look at certain accounts or certain persons or certain. So you need to look at the whole feed, the whole internet feed of information to have a statistical measure of what is said.
Just an add-on on that one. I think we experienced during the COVID and the pandemic that like a teaser or taste of this information at war, because there was a lot of misinformation during that time, and in Sweden we realized that we are not really up to it from the government side. We need to make sure that the government is available to answer questions, because they were just loaded with questions, people calling in or emailing or something. I think we've learned from that and try to boost, also using automation actually, to have some frequently asked questions, but rapidly developed to be able to serve the public and the society with information, so that they are provided information based on what they need. And that could be a mitigation of this as well, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah, one point, because information, I'm perhaps not giving solutions, but more problems. Because information operations require information. We have to think about how we protect our information, how we deny the opponent the monitoring of our national media space or social media space, or deny the gathering of information to launch different kinds of plan and launch different kinds of information operations. And that's something, I don't know, can we really do that? Can we deny the information? So if we could do that, I think we would be doing that already. So the thing that we have to do is to monitor the information space ourselves. And that's perhaps easier for small countries like us. It doesn't take so much resources. There's not so many platforms. The media space is smaller. So we have the capability to use AI to monitor our own media space, to detect and social media space, to detect these kind of malign information operations faster and try to react to them. And we also had, in Finland, I think also in Sweden, public broadcast companies. So the government is able to put its message out there through broadcasting companies and media resources that are government controlled. So we are not relying solely on private companies and private media companies. So we have the tools to hit back if we recognize these kind of operations.
Thank you. So I just want to say quickly that after lunch at 1:45, 3 of our guests, except for Vilma, because she has a prior commitment, will take part in a breakout session on Russian threats and AI. So I do have more questions related to Russia, but we'll save that for the breakout session. I have a question here about NATO, and I think this is important, and it also it conveys the view, which is very common, that it's, there's quite a negative view about NATO. And here we have representatives from 2 new NATO countries. So the question is, how are you showing empathy if you have joined NATO, the implicit assumption being that NATO is a negative organization? So I guess, what is your take on this? And did your views change? Vilma, you said that the views changed overnight, and I assume it changed in February of 2022. So how would you answer this question? And I'd love the views of others as well.
So first of all, to us, NATO is a savior at the moment. So we're in the honeymoon stage. To us, it looks everything that we always wanted. We haven't hit the reality stage yet, but I predict that's going to happen in 1 to 2 years, and especially if things calm down with the war. So I think we should be taking advantage of the honeymoon stage, because there are things that you can move forward and develop and inspire and make happen in that stage.
Yeah, the bottom line, I think, is that Finland has been trying to manage its relationship with Soviet Union and then Russia from 1918 forwards. And in February 2022, we saw that that management policy has ended. So we really didn't have any choice at that point. If we were looking, and we were looking in the future and our relationship with Russia, we saw that the management road is over, and now we have to try something else. And NATO is that we are trying something else. And we are, of course, signaling to Russia that we made this decision because what they did, and they had to think again what they are doing and what kind of world they want to have and what kind of powers or nations they want to have as their neighbors in the future. That's what we can do as a small state.
Yeah, I was almost returning the question, ask us in a few years' time, but I would agree what Vilma and Juha has mentioned, because we were also independent and neutral at once, and prior to that we have a history of just war fighting with Russia and Denmark. But now we are very much in line with what Juha just mentioned. This is our reaction to the reality that is shown by Russia, and it's like your turn. And that's why we think that being a NATO member is kind of a good thing.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we have to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our wonderful panelists.